Hi there, I'm Tom Cobbin from Beryl and Watson Lawyers, and today's video is going to cover travel insurance and tips and traps for people travelling with chronic illnesses. So if you suffer from a chronic illness and you want to travel overseas, there are a number of financial issues that can come up. The types of chronic illnesses that I'm speaking about are multiple sclerosis, MS, Parkinson's disease, cancer, including blood cancers, leukemias, etc., Alzheimer's, epilepsy, or any other physical injury which is of a chronic and ongoing nature. The financial issues that will be discussed in this video relate to getting and claiming on travel insurance for medical and other claims, COVID and travel insurance, and access to Centrelink when overseas. I'll provide some tips and hopefully it'll make the trip eventful for all the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. So by way of background, there are two different types of travel insurance. There is non-medical cover that provides you with the ability to claim for loss of luggage, theft, damage to property, cancelled flights, etc. And then there's medical cover, which is what it sounds like: overseas, hospital cover, doctor cover, medical evacuation expenses, etc. So taking out basic cover for non-medical travel insurance, it shouldn't matter that you have a pre-existing medical condition or a chronic illness. They don't predispose you to making those types of claims. And so disclose them by all means, but it really shouldn't make any difference. However, for medical travel insurance, pre-existing or chronic illnesses often will cause the insurer to ask questions and perhaps put limitations on your cover. You still should be able to get medical travel insurance for injuries or sicknesses which occur relating to perhaps accidents or frank illnesses which happen when you're overseas, but there may be restrictions for pre-existing conditions. Obviously, it's really important that you get travel insurance before you go, and indeed, some countries won't allow you in unless you can prove that you have medical or even just straight up travel insurance coverage. So pre-existing conditions, what are they? So travel insurance policies usually exclude pre-existing conditions from medical cover unless you can specifically apply for the cover despite your pre-existing condition and give reasons or at least explanations as to why you should be covered. To get cover despite a pre-existing chronic illness, you'll usually have to fill in an application form telling the insurer how your pre-existing condition affects you, the treatment you receive, and the medication you take. You'll often also need a certificate from your doctor, preferably your specialist, setting out the diagnosis, the prognosis, and confirmation that you are not a significant risk of getting sick whilst travelling, e.g. you're in remission or your condition is otherwise well controlled with treatment. You may also have to lodge a certificate with the insurer at least a few months before you travel. Hopefully the insurer agrees to provide you with the cover, which includes cover for your pre-existing condition. If not, you'll still have usually medical cover for frank incidents, but not necessarily for your pre-existing condition. So what about COVID-19 and travel insurance? So most travel insurers will cover you for COVID-19. However, the type of cover varies. Some examples are some insurers will only cover you for medical and medical transportation costs if you contract COVID or are diagnosed whilst you're overseas, not before you leave. Some policies include cancellation costs if you contract COVID before you travel. However, they'll often say that the COVID must have been contracted within X amount of days before the insurance starts, or also before the trip. Many policies don't cover border closures or quarantine orders, less relevant now, but very relevant a few years ago. Other policies limit cover for cruises, so they won't cover you for the Ruby Princess scenario. So in terms of claims, generally, for non-medical claims, you'll usually need proof of loss, e.g. a police report certifying that the items have been stolen or damaged. For medical claims, you'll usually need doctor and hospital certifications. There's usually a form that needs to be completed by the doctor. It can be difficult when you're dealing with other languages in foreign countries, but the form you get is from the insurer, and they usually have translation services. Hospitalisation and medevac decisions are usually made quickly, so that is oftentimes the application for insurance coverage will need to be made whilst you're in hospital. Maybe it won't even be you that's making the application, it'll be somebody else on your behalf. They're usually done really quickly. If the claim's not accepted, you have internal complaint options within the insurer. You can complain internally, or you have external complaint options as well at the ombudsman or in court. Generally speaking, though, that happens really quickly if you need urgent care, medevac and hospital care. There is also options other than travel insurance to get medical treatment when you're overseas, and what I'm talking about specifically is the Reciprocal Medicare arrangements. Australia has reciprocal Medicare arrangements or healthcare arrangements with a number of countries. This means that you get a subsidised or free treatment for essential care when you're overseas if it can't wait until you return to Australia without having to make any claim on your travel insurance policy. The treatment will usually include public hospital treatment, but may not extend to GPs, private doctors, ambulance or medication. Very similar to the type of Medicare treatment you would probably be entitled to if you were at home in Australia. Really briefly, the countries that have reciprocal Medicare arrangements with Australia are the UK, the Republic of Ireland, New Zealand, Italy, Malta, Belgium, the Netherlands, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Slovenia. Check the Services Australia website, they're updated all the time. If you're unable to get travel insurance, you should limit your travel to countries that have reciprocal arrangements, or at least those that are nearby. I've heard of a number of people travelling to countries nearby to countries with reciprocal arrangements so they can quickly jump across the border if they get crook. Obviously, there comes with a bunch of risks. So Centrelink benefits and overseas travel. Just very briefly, I'll round out with this. The DSP, many people who are in receipt of the DSP due to a chronic illness also look to go overseas, and they can do so for up to 28 days in any 12-month period if they're travelling overseas. If you are still overseas after 28 days, the DSP will usually stop or will stop. When you return to Australia, the DSP may be reinstated by Services Australia, but they also may require you to reapply. So there are some risks, particularly when the changing definitions of DSP apply, and it gets harder since you've first been deemed eligible. You can get the DSP for more than 28 days when you're overseas in some circumstances. For example, if you're assessed as eligible under a manifest medical rules, for example, you're terminally ill, you can continue to receive it up to 28 days. Or if you move to a country, in some circumstances I should say, if you move to a country that has social security reciprocal agreements with Australia, for example, the UK, European countries, some of them, New Zealand, there's differing benefits and differing entitlements, so you've got to do your homework before you go. And I should say it's always a good idea to let Services Australia or Centrelink know before you head overseas. If Centrelink makes a decision with respect to your DSP or job seeker entitlements that you're not happy with, you can appeal. You've got time limits to do so, and you should get advice. And also, when you get back to Australia after a trip away, you should let Centrelink know or Services Australia know immediately. Disability insurance and travel. Most employment or superannuation funds include insurance for disability benefits like for TPD and for income protection, which is a monthly payment. To be eligible for these benefits, you have to lodge a claim, and that has to include medical reports or certificates. If you're already getting income protection payments, you normally have to provide ongoing progress forms of medical pro formas. You'll still need to do this when overseas, and you can run into issues where you need those to be completed by an Australian doctor and you don't have access when you're overseas, although telehealth has changed that somewhat. Most policies do allow payments while you're overseas, but some restrict that. It's worth checking. But ultimately, you can usually travel overseas and receive these payments, but we recommend, again, you do your homework before you go. So getting expert advice. Traveling overseas with a chronic illness can be tricky, but not impossible. Certainly, there are financial things that you need to consider, like around travel insurance and Centrelink, as we've discussed, but it's still definitely a possibility, and you should get advice. You can get advice up front, or if you run into issues when you're there, you can get in touch and we can give you that advice also. Thanks for listening.